You're listening to Making Money Online with Lisa Johnson, the podcast that tells you what it really takes to build a business and the simple steps to get you there. I'm determined to share with you the reality of easy, simple business marketing tips to make passive income so that you can start making money online. Hi guys, Lisa Johnson here, bringing you this week's podcast. I have a guest with me this week. I want to introduce you to Carla Shohet. Carla is a life and business strategist, and she's also a fellow anti-bullying campaigner. And so I thought it would be really good to bring Carla on to chat about what to do if you are being bullied as an entrepreneur. And I don't just mean online. There's lots of different ways of being bullied. I mean, it is kind of prolific online at the moment in 2021 when I'm recording this. There's a lot of bullying going on and we see it all the time. But also offline and how that affects you as well and what kind of things you can do about it. Because it's all well and good talking about, bullying and how it affects us. And I've talked about it in past episodes because of the past of my bullying past. But actually, at some point, most entrepreneurs will feel bullied in some way or, and this is a bit controversial, will bully without realizing they are bullying or without realizing they're causing someone to feel bullied. And so rather than talk about, how we all feel that, I know that helps when we talk about those things because other people go, oh, I don't feel so alone now. But I want to talk a bit about strategies as well to help with both of those situations so that, there's a way out. There's some way you can feel like it's not going to ruin your entire business, which is how I felt early on. So welcome, Carla, to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Lisa. Nice to be here.
So let's have a start. Like most people know my background and how I was bullied as a child. And then, in the first year of my business, I was bullied really badly online by a group of competitor coaches who decided I shouldn't have space in the online world. Tell me a bit about what you've suffered, because you obviously moved here from a new country, from a different country to a new country. Tell us a bit about what happened there.
Yeah, so I had never experienced bullying until I came to this country. I came here aged just 15, 2 days after my birthday. I arrived having an A star in English when I was studying in Italy and not understanding a single word, when I was plunked into an English school here as a 15-year-old and had to just get on with it. So I didn't really understand the words. However, I did understand that the remarks that were being shouted at me from a group of people were definitely disparaging remarks. Some of them went over my head, luckily, because I couldn't understand exactly what they were saying. But I knew the feelings behind the words and that the bullies were shouting at me. And, I knew some of the insults were racist and they were calling me a lesbian sometimes, or the T word, which at the time didn't know what meant, but I just knew it wasn't nice. and I certainly understood when they would shout things like, go back to your own country. So that was my first experience of being bullied. And as I said, because I hadn't experienced it before, it kind of went over my head and didn't really affect me. Honestly, it was almost hindsight that I realized I'd been bullied.
Yeah.
And I only realized that I'd been through it myself unaffected, which is unusual, I have to say, because the language barrier helped me to not react. I couldn't react. I didn't know how to.
Yeah.
So I just
that's not a bad thing, I think, sometimes.
And that is actually a really good strategy, both for children and adults, and in business in particular, not, as you know very well yourself, as you've been taught, not reacting, and it's a very, very good strategy because you're not giving any satisfaction to the bully to keep going.
And I always think, actually, you can't have a war or an argument with one person. So if one of you opts out, that kind of stops it in its tracks.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Absolutely right. It just, you're not feeding the trolls, as we've said before. So that was my first experience. And then as an adult, I started my professional career as a psychologist in social justice in Wandsworth in London. And I was working with children and families. And there I saw the worst kind of bullying that I could ever imagine exists. Physical violence, sexual abuse, both children and adults, drugs that led to horrible, horrible types of bullying, mental bullying, you name it, I saw. And I was actually the first point of contact where people would refer, the victims were referred to us. And I basically left in the end. I opened my own counselling business because I just couldn't cope, especially with the children stuff. And it was really, really hard because there was, I was working with families that were of low socioeconomic status, usually with little or no education, and it was kind of a perpetual cycle of bullying. So I just couldn't. I mean, there's angels that work in these kind of spaces, and now the kind of work I do is in charities, support women that flee situations that I witnessed, and with children to escape from and get safe from the kind of bullying that, hopefully most people won't experience in their lifetime. And that's what, really made me a really strong advocate for anti-bullying, which most people don't know because I don't shout about it. But maybe with this interview, I decided to actually talk about it because it's really important. And we've had our discussions on our points of view on how we feel, bullying is defined, for example. And then also a couple of years ago, I discovered lots of bruises on my son. And, he's quite a boisterous boy. And I just thought, oh, must be playing in the playground, but actually eventually he opened up, thankfully. But only after several months we discovered that he'd been physically bullied by a particular boy with anger issues, poor child, and decided to use my son as a punch bag because I'd always taught my children not to retaliate, and he was too worried about him getting into even more trouble because he was a trouble. So yeah. So it's very close to my heart, obviously.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? The whole teaching people not to retaliate, because that's what we do teach. We teach people not to retaliate. And I remember at school being taught not to retaliate, not to do anything back. And now when I think back, there is a part of me that wishes I'd just punched one of them in the face, because then it would have stopped. But I was an emotional punch bag for all of them, because I never retaliated ever. And now as an adult, I think we're told not to retaliate as well. And I can see how it's a good thing in some ways, because it does take you out of a situation. Like, people can't have an argument with you if you're not kind of defending yourself back. But sometimes you want to defend, don't you? Because somebody says something online about you, and your immediate reaction, if it's a lie, is to want to tell the truth about your side of the story. And I used to do that a lot, and now I don't, because what is the point? You could go on and on. But what I'd love to discuss with you first, because this is how this podcast kind of started with our discussions offline, is about defining bullying. Because I think it's a really interesting one. From what I've seen, we've seen bullying as in hardcore bullying. I've had a knife to my throat. You've worked with people who have been in some awful situations. And bullying can be described as so many different things. For instance, I had somebody that I decided I did not want to be a client this year. And when I asked them, when I had that discussion with them and said, look, the kind of things that you're doing aren't in integrity with my values. And so I think it would be better for both of us if you were to leave the program. And she agreed and said, yeah, actually, it's not really working for me. I'd like to leave the program. And so we went our separate ways. And then all over Facebook, it was that I had bullied her out of the program. And I think it's really interesting how people use bullying for so many different things. That to me wasn't bullying. It was a discussion and she left. But it's whether it's hard to explain, but it's whether is bullying if somebody feels bullied, or is bullying if you actually have bullied?
Well, we had our own little discussion about this, didn't we? So it's a really, really interesting topic, because the truth is, to me, is that nobody can really ever deny anyone else about how they feel.
True.
And I think, and nor should anyone ever be invalidated for feeling bullied, because bullying doesn't always show up as a violent act as you experience with a knife to your throat, or it can be actually very subtle and covert. And that's what controlling narcissists do, for example. That's bullying. And it's very invisible. And it can be just implied sometimes. But it's also true that the person that feels victimized we all carry trauma. Trauma is part of life. And unless you're aware of it and you work through it, your perception of things can be affected by your, mindset blueprint of things that have happened to you in the past. And so you overreact, or you take things personally. It happened to me very recently with something you said. And, thankfully, through our discussions, I was really able to see your point of view. And I think you were able to see mine.
I was, yeah.
And so, but that's not always an opportunity available. So I think it's really important to not kind of dismiss someone that's feeling bullied, because although it might not be intended as such, by dismissing someone feeling bullied, then it means that they don't feel, able to talk about it. They feel, and then it gets hidden because, unless you have a knife to your throat, then you're not a victim of bullying. But that's not the truth, because women, for example, who suffer, or even in the workplace, since you're talking about entrepreneurship here, there's so many people that lead with an iron fist and they bully the team, and they don't realize they're doing it because that's how they were brought up and that's how they learned to be. And, it's very common for people that have been bullied, for example, to build a very, very strong wall of protection against themselves. And then they become almost bullies without intending to. So the one thing that I always teach both my clients and my children at home and myself, because I have it printed on a poster in my house. And I always use the word think before you write anything online, before you speak to anybody. And it's hard. It's not easy to always do this, but the word think, and it's an acronym. It stands for something to prompt you to remember to think before you write or speak. Is it T for true? Is it H helpful? Is it I inspiring? Is it N necessary? And is it K kind? Because, and the last two things, necessary and kind, for me are probably the most important letters within that kind of reminder word, because I really think everything, no matter what and no matter how small, it can always be said or shared or talked from a place of with heart and with compassion and thoughtfulness and kindness, basically.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think there's a few things here just to pick up on before we carry on. I think the first one is, I do think we have to be careful not to define everything as bullying, because then it becomes an issue that you can't even state an opinion because somebody might think that it's bullying. Like they feel bullied because you've stated your
right.
I'm definitely seeing online it going more and more that way. I get called a bully every time somebody doesn't like my opinion. Like, that happens. And I definitely am not bullying them. They might feel bullied, but half the time I don't think they actually do. I think it's just a nice, easy word to use on somebody that's an anti-bullying campaigner. I do think there's a problem. Like if we water it down so much that bullying just means I don't agree with you, then I think we have a problem, because then people will start not seeing bullying as a big problem. And it is a big problem. Like we both know it's a big problem. It's interesting what you say about the think. And I like that acronym. I like the acronym that you have there with like, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? But even there, I do think everything we put online and everything we say should think about those things. But I think you can't always be kind. So, for instance, if I am wanting to have a bit of tough love with and say, look, guys, like, I understand that you're not getting very far with what you're doing on right now, but that's because you're not doing it. You're not putting the work in. That often when I do that doesn't feel very kind, but it's necessary. It needs to be said. Otherwise, they will stay stuck in the same place. But then on the other side of it, I think there are ways to be able to say things in a different way. So before, when I used to call out I'm known for calling out some of the things in the industry that aren't very good things, that aren't nice things, people are getting conned by. And how I used to come at it was from this is not good, stop doing it kind of a way. And that didn't feel very kind to me. And I didn't feel very nice doing it. And now I've realized there is a way of doing it that is kinder. And that is with empathy. Like, so for instance, I might start something off with, if you're using this scarcity tactic in business, I understand why you are. We've all been taught to use it. So there's no judgment here. However, please stop bloody doing it. It is not the right thing to do. Yeah. So it still calls out stuff in the industry, but from a different way. And so it's read with a different feeling, and people do feel less kind of like, oh my gosh, she's talking about me. This is like, I feel victimized. And so I completely agree with you that there are ways to do things as well. What are some of the strategies that you have for people that are feeling bullied in any way, whether online or offline? We spoke before about power, and I'd love you to talk me through your views on that.
Yeah, so the things that I mostly work with the clients that I choose to work with are three things mainly. Number one is, as you said, everybody has power. So learning about what your power is So it stops things like comparisonitis, and you look at everyone else and what they're doing, and it makes you feel like an imposter and makes you feel like you're not good enough. So I help my clients pull out their power, so that they don't feel less than, and also because I think when your perception of yourself, when your self-concept is low, you become a little bit of a snowflake, especially online, because online removes lots of kind of human barriers, and we find things, we find these things more offensive, or we find it easier to say certain things that we wouldn't say face to face. So, but I think when you know what your power is and you're empowered by your own power, you're just a stronger person. So that's one of my jobs as a coach, as a mentor, to help each client to find what that is, so that they can feel strong in their own abilities, in their own mind, in their own goals, and stop looking around and stop really caring about external factors that we cannot control. Because, like you rightly said, when I said, oh, things can be said with kindness, and you said, well, sorry, I said to you something like, things can be said in a less judgmental way. And you said, well, my opinion is always going to be judgmental, but it's my opinion. And I was like, actually, you're absolutely right. It is a judgment. We always make judgments. And it's up to the person and how they're receiving it to then figure out why they're feeling a certain way about it.
And that is power, isn't it? That's power. That's, if you have power and you realize you have power, you can decide how you feel about something. And actually, one of the things you said earlier about not responding, sometimes taking back your power when you feel powerless, if you're being bullied or victimized online or offline, is to not respond. That is power in itself, isn't it? To not feel like you have to fight back.
And also it gives you, the reason I always say don't respond, don't react, is because a reaction, you're absolutely right. It means that the person that's triggered you has the power, but you can just hold back and wait and think about it and realize things that, in the first instance, you're not going to be able to realize because you're triggered. And so you're not in your body, essentially. You're just kind of reacting, which is never good in anything.
Like. I've been there.
Me too. And it's a learned skill. Once you learn what your power is and you have, some help in figuring that out, you can really own yourself. And it feels very different. You really don't care as much about, how other people see you. And I've seen you develop into that even in the couple of years that I've been following you. You actually said it. I don't care what people think. And actually, it's human nature to care, and we all like to be liked, but to a certain extent, there has to be balance. And if you then have to feel muzzled on your Facebook page, for example, because people like me might take offense and, they'll call you a bully or they'll feel emotionally bullied, then you're never going to be able to speak. So it's definitely a fine balance to be able to.
It's a balance, yeah. But honestly, it's people have thought that things were about them before, and even, not just you, but other people have thought, oh, this must be about me. And it's made me really realize that even with no intention at all, people could feel bad by something I say. And I do take that on board, and I do kind of try and think before I write something. But it's hard because, even if I write an email, for instance, I'm going to give you a real life example. I wrote an email about me going to a steakhouse. My Friday emails are always a little bit funny. Yeah. I wrote one about going to a steakhouse. And somebody wrote to me who was a vegetarian and said that she felt victimized by the email. And it made me go, I don't know how I'm ever going to be able to speak about anything without someone feeling bad about it. And it was at that point, which was about 1.5 years ago, that I went, I've got to stop trying to filter anything and just write whatever I want to write. Some people are going to think it's about them. Some people aren't. Some people are going to feel victimized by what I'm saying. Some people aren't. But if I'd started to kind of get to this point where every time I wrote something, I thought to myself, would anyone feel hurt by this? Would anyone feel this might be about them? And there was never a time when it was no.
Yeah. And you end up being paranoid and you can't be yourself anymore. And that's how we become, lots of things for lots of different people, and we're just not ourselves, which is really not a great thing, not a great place to be in, to not know who you are. So definitely not a good.
So one is power. Tell us your second strategy.
The second one that I teach, and it's really, really important, I think, for anyone, no matter whether you're an entrepreneur or anyone. I think having an advocate, everybody needs one. I always have more than one coach in my life because I need to be pushed, I need to be supported. And for me, I'm that person for my clients. I advocate their dreams, their vision, their goals. And that's, it helps you to accelerate towards the kind of life that you want to create, the kind of business you want to have. I mean, have you ever heard of Serena Williams not having a coach? Or, the top most successful people, sportsmen, and even people like singers that are famous, that have done really well in their career, they all have a coach. They have a vocal coach. They have all sorts of like physical coach, mindset coaches. There's a reason for that, and there is a reason that, and I really strongly believe that having an advocate really leads you to success more quickly than doing things by yourself. Yeah,
it definitely is. And even having a mastermind, what I've seen in there is that people often come into the mastermind because they just want a group of people that have their back, so that they don't feel as scared to say the things they want to say on social media or to do lives and things, because they know there's some people there that will have their back and be there for them. And that's like having an advocate or advocates. And it can definitely make you feel like you have a little bit more power.
Yeah, and absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. It's about knowing that you've got someone in your corner, because business, it can be tough. It's ups and downs, and when you have the big failures, I do speech marks with my fingers, even though you can't see me. They are massive learning opportunities, but sometimes we don't see that if we don't have someone that has our back, because we're feeling down, we're feeling like we've put a lot of work in and got nothing out of it, but we always do get something out of it. So it's important to have someone in our corner, someone that has our back, that puts us back on track and shows us, the things that we need to see when we can't see them for ourselves. Yeah. And then the third thing that I always teach my clients is that it doesn't matter what dark place you're at. It doesn't matter how bad you feel, how terrible your situation is in any moment of, in any part of your life. There is always a solution. There's always a way out. And as a coach, as a therapist, as a parent, I've seen this time and time again. It's never the end. There is always a solution. And I think that's really important to remember.
Yeah, I have a tattoo on my wrist to remind me of that, of a semicolon, to remind me that it is never the end of the story. Like, even when you think it's the end of the story goes on, and you will feel in a very different place at another time. And I had that because of what happened to me when I was younger, when I was being bullied. At that point, when I was 21 years old, I thought that was the end. I didn't really want to be here anymore because I thought that was the end of the story, and that's how it was always going to be. And if you look at me now compared to then, like, would that 16 to 21-year-old have known that this was going to be my life and that I would be living like my dreams, really? No, not at all. So you never know what's around the corner, and having that tattoo just always reminds me that, in case, and helps me.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I also have a tattoo on the same place that reminds me to be me.
What is your tattoo?
I think it's my tattoo is slightly bigger. But this is a calligrapher's, tattooist calligraphy that reminds me, every time I wash my face, it reminds me to just be me.
Oh,
and not to, because I'm a recovering people pleaser. So for me, this is a really, really important reminder to own my own power, which is what I now teach my clients.
I wish you could see the tattoo, guys. It's a really, really nice tattoo. So we've talked a bit about, defining bullying. We've talked about some strategies to deal with bullying. I think one of the ways that I've dealt with it in the last few years, I didn't used to deal with it well, I think everybody knows that. But one of the ways I deal with it now is to realize that hurt people. And so when somebody is how, my perception of bad to me online, and actually my perception is skewed because of the bullying I had when I was younger. So I would take things more to heart than a person, for instance, that hasn't been bullied when they were younger. I would see it more as bullying. And how I've dealt with that is to look at them and realize that actually, for somebody to say something nasty about me online means that they're going through something. There's no happy people that do that to other people. And if they're going through something, well, that can't be nice, can it? And so if you start to look at things like that and see where people have their own foibles, you never know what's going on in someone's life. So you never know why they might be doing something. And yes, they might be taking it out on you, but actually you don't know what's really going on the other side. It changes you, and it makes you feel less scared and angry and more empathetic to them as what you see as a bully. Because I don't think and this has really changed me in the last few years, I don't think there are bullies. I think there are people that do things to protect themselves, protect their own mindsets and protect how they're feeling at the time, whether they're feeling like a failure, whether, if I think about some of the nasty things people have said to me, like, God, she's lying about how much money she earns, or she's a horrible person. She shouldn't be in business, or any of those kind of things, or she'll disappear within a year, and this kind of thing. When I first heard that, I was like, God, what horrible people! They are bullies. Now I can see it for what it is, which is, they're feeling like a failure. They're feeling like they're not secure, and by actually saying things about someone else, it makes them feel better for a period of time. It's their protector parts coming out and trying to protect themselves. So no one's really a bully. They behave in a way that is bullying because of how they feel. And that does, for a victim, and I did used to feel like a victim, make you feel a lot better when you realise that, because then it's not just somebody that has a thing that they hate you. It's an issue that they have about themselves.
I could not agree more with every word you said. And, bullies are born from hurt. So when we consider that, if we stop labeling people, as bullies or as anything, and we start maybe looking with compassion, with heart, and with empathy, like you said, it just releases your anger and it makes you better. It's a bit like forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't for the other person, it's for yourself. It's so that you don't have to live with the stress and the anger, which actually affects you on a physical level and makes you ill. So, trauma affects us so much on a physical level we don't realize. And, those people that are angry and act out in a way that isn't really them, they're hurting themselves as well, because it's not nice to be horrible. No one wants to be that way. So, I absolutely agree. And that's what I was saying before. We all have trauma and we all are triggered by different things, and it's hurting people. And if we can only have this awareness, and I think that's what it is, it's about educating the people that are behaving badly by behaving better ourselves. By not reacting, by acting with kindness in response to their anger.
Yeah, there's a great charity that I am an ambassador for called Bullies Out, and they see things very much that way. So they don't call people bullies; they say people that have bullied, because that's not who they are. That's not their identity. They've done a thing, and they help not just the bullied, but also the people that have bullied and the bystander. Because I think being a bystander and seeing that happen can be something that you need to deal with as well. Guys, I'll put the link to Bullies Out in the show notes. I would love it if you could become a member. It's only £5 for the year, and all of the work they do to educate people is amazing. And the more we can educate people from a younger age as well, then the less we're going to have this as adults. Carla, thank you for being here. It's been a great conversation. I love talking about things like this, because the more we talk about things, the less people feel alone in how they feel. And the more, and that's not just people who have been bullied, but people that might be doing things right now that they don't feel proud of, that they don't feel great about what they're doing. Sometimes they need to hear that, it's not necessarily their real self that is doing it, and just a part of them that is trying to protect them. And you can change that. We can all change those bits about ourselves that we don't love. It's a great conversation to have, and there'll be more conversations definitely about this on the podcast. If people want to come and hang out with you and see the kind of things that you're up to, where's the best place for them to do that?
I think right now the best place is coming to my website, carlashohet.com. I don't know if you can put a link somewhere if you want to, or just look me up on Facebook. I'm always on there on my personal profile. I do a lot of public posting because I want to share as much as possible the learnings that I have in my life and in my business with everyone. So,
fantastic.
I'd love to see you.
Oh, well, it's been great having this conversation. What I love about having this conversation is that Carla and I had a bit of a thing on Facebook not too long ago, where something I said Carla thought was about her, and reacted, thinking that maybe I was bullying her. And we were able to have a very frank, very open conversation about what was meant, what wasn't meant, how it made her feel, how it made me feel. And I think if more people could just do that, it things would be solved a lot quicker. And that's why we decided to have this discussion, because there's always different sides to every story. There's always different truths to every truth. Not everybody's truth is the same. And it's just, hearing about those things from different people that make us understand others more, which is important for these kind of things. So,
absolutely. You can discover a lot about yourself by having those conversations as well. So you grow from it as well.
You definitely do. So thank you for being so open with us on here, and for coming on. And I will speak to you soon. And guys, thank you for listening. Go to the show notes for the Bullies Out link as well. And I will speak to you next week for another podcast. Thank you for listening to Making Money Online with Lisa Johnson. If you'd like to get hold of my guide to launching, go to lisajohnson.com/launch and let's get you making money online.